Today, I thought I'd chat to you about time. Time, the commodity, time, the precious resource, time, the thing that so many have so little of, and some seem to have an abundance of. Many people struggle with time, but then there are those that run multinational corporations. They're married, they have kids, they train hard, they compete in sports, and somehow they still seem to have all the time in the world. How is this? The truth that we all know is that we all only have 24 hours in a day. Some people just use it better than others. And of the 24 hours, we spend 8 hours sleeping, 8 working, and 8 in traffic if you're in Johannesburg or Cape Town. It's often seemingly impossible to fit anything else into our schedules, which leaves us with only that which we need to do and very little of what we want to do. Then enter additional uncontrollable realities into the mix, like newborn babies, familial responsibilities, and emergencies, and bam, you just lost another batch of hours. The red flags for those that struggle with time are everywhere. We hear things like, I don't have the time, and you'll always hear that intonation, have. I wish there were more hours in a day. I'm too busy. I work better under pressure. I have a creative block. I cannot do it all. And then often the words always and never, either before or at the end of what they're saying. Most of these are made up stories around how we allow time to own us instead of us owning time. This discussion resides in the concept of one's relationship with time and our ability to improve it so that time works for us and not against us. So today I'm going to look at this from two perspectives. The first is our challenges with time, and the second is concepts and strategies to manage time. So from the perspective of challenges with time, I'll name a few. I'll move through these as quickly as I can. There's never enough time. We are overwhelmed with busyness. I'm sure you've met people in your life that are so busy being busy that they don't have time for anything else. And I always recall the story when I was standing in a line at a licensing department back when we did this. It was a long line. I was near the front, at least I could see the end of the line. And there was a guy standing in front of me with a motorbike helmet in one hand and a pile of files in the other hand. And he was clearly either representing a business or he was a courier, but his job was to move around and go places and help out with admin. And he got a call on his cell phone and he answered the call. And I, of course, could only hear from his side. I couldn't hear what the person on the other side of the phone was saying. But the guy on the phone answered, I am so busy, I'm standing in line. So the person on the other end of the phone obviously asked him what he's doing. But he had this idea that he was really, really busy standing in line. And this was early on, way, way before my coaching career. But even then, I watched and I listened to this and I thought, that doesn't make sense. How can you be so busy doing nothing? And then into my various careers and into coaching, and I always reflected on this and had time to think about it. And this is the reality of what we find in our lives, both personally and in business, is that people are busy doing nothing, or they're busy doing a lot, and that's the overwhelm. But this word busy is a flag that's flown to give people a reason for doing what they're doing, very often not the thing that they want to or need to be doing. In many time management books, we hear of this idea of competing priorities, which is really balancing work, family, health, and personal goals. Where we see this very often is where things like health compete with things like wants, almost material wants, where if you can imagine someone that's got a health issue, goes and seeks a professional like a doctor, a chiropractor, a nutritionist, something like that, and the person says, in order to get you from where you are to where you want to or need to be, you need to see me X number of times a week, and you need to do all of these things, and it's going to cost you 5,000 Rand a month. And the response to that is, like, that's too much money. I can't do that. But the person just bought a R1 million car and booked a 100,000 Rand holiday. So that's an example of competing priorities in the health space. But that still we still experience this with time as well, is that one thing that we can or want to or should or need to be doing competes with another, and then we find ourselves in overwhelm as well. we have this idea of a paradox of choice where we are faced with too many choices, and that results in decision fatigue and also slow progress. So where we often experience this is where we go to a supermarket and we're looking for a particular product. We find the aisle, we go to the shelf or the area, the rack, and there's the product, but there are 4,000 versions of the product that we could take, ceiling to floor, one end to the other, and we just want a can of something, but there's so many brands, so many choices, so many variations that we end up just staring instead of doing anything. That happens with the decisions that we make, but also the actions that we take. Instead of making the decision or taking the action, we end up staring and doing nothing. So if you think about this in the workplace, it's very often that you're looking at multiple screens or you have multiple projects or tasks. It could even be papers or files on the desk. And instead of doing the work, you end up staring at all of the work that you have to do. You might be familiar with Parkinson's law, which says that work expands to fill the time allocated or available for its completion. So we find this in many, many areas of our life. And if you reflect on your own life, maybe the past, or even what's going on now, you could probably find an example of where it's currently present. An example that I sometimes think of is that if you're moving home and you've got to pack up the house, you could allocate 3 months to do it and it'll take you 3 months, or you could allocate 3 days to do it and it'll take you 3 days. The next is procrastination and perfectionism. Both of these lead to inaction. And if you haven't seen the Tim Urban TED Talk, you can find it on YouTube. Just search for Tim Urban procrastination. It is a very, very funny story about when he had to do his PhD, but it's got some very good messages about procrastination coming through. And we know that perfectionism is a diagnosable pathology of some sort. It really gets in the way of people moving forward because they need things to be just perfect, and very few things are perfect. There are occasions and reasons in lives, personally and professionally, where one does need perfection, like sometimes in the vocation of engineering. You don't want to build a bridge or a damn wall that's not perfect. But in most cases, the feeling of perfectionism does slow us down. There's also the myth, and I very strongly say myth, of multitasking, because this idea of cognitive switching, which is mentally moving from one thing to the other and back and forth, this comes at a cost, and that cost is time. It absolutely reduces efficiency. So even those that are seemingly fairly good at multitasking are probably diluting their efforts in both or more, if it's more than two, the things that they are doing. Lastly, we have the idea of burnout and exhaustion. Poor time management leads to stress and diminished productivity. And these things are real, maybe exaggerated in today's society with under the banner of mental health, but they are real. But I'll tell you a story about burnout. It's a story that represents many, many situations, and they're documented. You can find this. A real life example is where someone's very burnt out in their job. So they leave the business and they go work for another business doing exactly the same thing, but they're bored out of their minds. So they go back to the previous business, doing the previous job where they said they were burnt out, but then they would rather be burnt out than bored. We see this all the time. So those are very conceptual, but maybe more pragmatically, I'll introduce you to a few more ideas, concepts, things you're familiar with that are definitely, they pose as challenges with time. We all experience interruptions, whether it's people, emails, or calls, whatever it is. We're working on something and we get interrupted. And we know that it, once interrupted, or even when you leave your work and go back, there's a period in which the work that you're doing isn't as efficient as it was. That's probably during the interruption. And then you walk away, you come back, or you've been interrupted and you're at your desk and then you get back into it. There's always a minute or two, or even more, that is required for you to get back into the work that you were doing. There's a big loss of time, not just during the interruption, but often preceding it and then definitely post the interruption. We also have the inevitables like kids and family, public holidays, school holidays. They get in the way of our doing things, and we have to navigate our way around these. We've got real distractions in our lives. Self-help, even related to my industry of coaching, can be a distraction because people get addicted to the art and the act of helping themselves, watching the YouTube videos, reading the books, going to conferences, that they end up doing all of that and nothing really changes. There's also the shiny object syndrome. If you don't know about that, it's where you're doing one thing or you're focused on one thing and something else catches your attention to the effect that you consciously or unconsciously drop the thing that you were doing and pursue the other thing. Addictions are real, many, many addictions, some serious like alcohol, narcotics, etc. in our lives, and they can suck time from us like no other. But we have new addictions in the world right now, like social media, and we're all familiar with the phrase doom scrolling. You can be on YouTube or TikTok, and before you know it, 2 hours have passed. I'm working with someone right now that had to make a decision to drop TikTok because it was taking hours and hours of his life. And he described the feeling to me once it was dropped, like there was this emptiness. And then there was some mental, physical, and emotional experiences within that emptiness. And when he was describing it to me, I asked him, are you describing having dropped TikTok or did you just go off cocaine? Because he was truly having withdrawal symptoms. He was feeling borderline sick at having dropped this addiction to social media. People can definitely get in our way. I mentioned them in terms of interruptions, but also in terms of emotions. A lot of people find business and their jobs very, very easy to an extent. Of course, risk comes with that. And the entrepreneurs are bigger risk takers than anyone else. But even for those that find business very easy, what they find difficult, and we find this at a leadership level a lot, is people. People find working with people difficult because people come with feelings and emotions. And often that takes time to navigate, whether you're leading them or working with them or whatever it might be. There's also the idea of guilt when you're doing one thing over the other. So you might have outstanding work responsibilities, but you're home early with the family and the kids, and you're feeling guilty when you're home about work, and you're feeling guilty about home when you're at work. So there's this cross guilt that happens, which often for a lot of people leads to stress and burnout. For a lot of professions and a lot of industries, there's bureaucracy and red tape, and just to do what you need to do really takes going through a lot of hoops and jumping a lot of hurdles. And for some people in businesses, it really does take a lot of time just to do what you need to do. And the feeling is that you shouldn't need to do this. You should just do the work that you do and it gets passed and you move forward. But often things get stalled for months and months, if not years, with some projects. Most people need time to think. Again, whether it's their job or their profession or their business. The benefit of carving out time to think gets you into flow, has you come up with ideas, has you be creative and innovative. And because of the time demands in our relationship with time, we often don't have the opportunity to think as much as we want to. Mindset is a big thing with time management and ownership of time. You got to get your head right. You can't be a victim of time. You got to be an owner of time. We also want to learn and grow, and sometimes that in itself is a competing priority because we have a full-time job, we have family, we have other things that we want to do just in between and around those, like sports and socializing, and we want to improve who we are and what we do. We want to upskill, but that takes us a significant amount of time. And in addition to what we do, we also want to do more things. We want to do what we love. We want to do what we want. We want to do what's important. And a lot of people find a struggle in trying to do that. So on the back of identifying the challenges with time, let's have a look at some of the concepts and strategies to work with time. The first, and this is one that I have personally used numerous times habitually, but I've also introduced to clients and worked with clients using this as a tool. It's called the Pomodoro method, like a Pomodoro tomato. And there's a cute history to it, so you might want to just Google it, Pomodoro time management method, something like that, and you'll get the history. It's very old. It's probably 5 decades old. It's been used for a long time. And everyone's played with different iterations, but the basic premise is you work for 25 minutes and you take a 5-minute break, then you work for 25 minutes again, and so on. And there are two benefits to this. It works for two types of people. The first is those that struggle to work for a protracted period of time. It forces them to work for 25 minutes. And also those that just go on and on and on and on with their work and they never take a break. The latter end of that ongoing work is probably a little bit diluted in its efficacy. People get brain fog, they're tired, they're sore from sitting in a chair at a desk and so on. So it has them stop working earlier enough. And during that break, don't go from your laptop to a phone. Stand up, walk around, go get some fresh air, have a glass of water, have a chat with someone. Just move away from anything that's related to work, like work itself or that project or task itself, and being on a screen. Depending on what you do and who you are, you can create your own version of this. It could be 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off. But the agreed upon default of this is 25 on, 5 minute off. Play with it. You might be familiar with the Eisenhower matrix, both by the name or by the action. It's about urgent and important. So if you draw a 4-square grid and you put urgent on the one axis and important on the other, doesn't matter which is which, at least when you do it for the first time, it really doesn't matter. You take all the tasks that you need to or want to do and you plot them in terms of urgency and importance. And where you've got one that is high urgency and high importance, that'll go to the top of the list. Where you've got one that is on the low side of both, that'll go to the bottom of the list, and everything will fall in between. So it helps you to prioritize everything that you have going on for you. And then you can put that in a newly written to-do list, and it'll help. The next strategy is time blocking, which reduces the cognitive load. You schedule specific times for tasks instead of just having a to-do list. You may be familiar with Pareto. It's when you focus on high-end or high-impact tasks, because we know that 80% of the results come from 20% of the effort, and that's what Pareto is. It's the 80-20 rule. We've also got the 2-minute rule, which says that if you can do anything in under 2 minutes, do it now. Like just send that email out. But don't let that compete with time blocking, for example, because there might, or which I'll talk about in a second, energy-based time management, because you don't want to use other times for admin, especially if it's brainless type of admin. So you don't want the 2-minute rule to compete with time blocking or energy-based time management, which is really understanding when you are most energetic, when your thoughts are most clear, when you're most creative, and you want to block out that time for the creative type of work, and maybe thinking, and maybe design work, and maybe anything where you have to come up with things. You've got to use your brain in a creative, innovative way. So if you know that you're good in the morning, block out a period in the morning in which you do that creative type of work. Don't do admin in your creative time. Perhaps the last one for today is the idea of batching, where we reduce that cognitive load by grouping similar work. So let's take an industry like financial planning. Financial planners are pulled in many directions and they have a lot of responsibilities. And when they consider batching and time blocking, they may divide their week up into, for example, these are the times and days that I meet with clients. These are the times and days that I write financial plans. These are the times and days that I do marketing and attend conferences and webinars, and I work with asset management businesses. Related to time to think is the deep work. So especially if you are in an academic type of career or you own a business and you need to be strategic, you got to carve out time for deep work. It's very, very important to do this. Call it thinking time. Maybe some more strategies are around the idea of a time audit. So I have a time questionnaire, which is casual and doesn't produce a report because it's not a coded psychometric paper, but it's 2 or 3 pages of questions that'll get you thinking very deeply about how you spend your time. So you're welcome to go into my website, successcoaching.co.za, and just complete the form, the contact form, and say time questionnaire, please, and I'll send it off to you. You could also do an audit of your time, just in a journal-like style, or you could use a note to your phone or a spreadsheet, however you want to do it. But be very, very, very specific in tracking your time over at least a week. 2 weeks is ideal, but at least a week. Track your time, every single thing that you do and every minute of it. Because what you do during this exercise is you collect data. And once you have the data, you will learn and you can strategize and you can act to improve your relationship with time and improve your ownership of time as a result. Structure and routine are very, very important. Without this basic foundation to your life, again, both professionally and personally, you will struggle to manage or own or work with time. And structure and routine, the basic premise of this is know what time you wake up in the morning and know what time you go to bed at night. And then you can build it up and roll it out from there. But those two basic, the beginning and the end, bookend the structure and the routine. Understand what your time wasters are. if you go down YouTube wormholes, know how much time you spend on that. If you're on TikTok for 4 hours, know how much time you spend on that. If you watch TV for 16 hours on the weekend, know that. See where you waste time and be honest with yourself and drop the time wasters. I know it's easier said than done because sometimes the time wasters are truly an addiction, like a drug or like alcohol. So it might not be as easy as going cold turkey. You might need a phased out approach, and you might need support in various ways. Support does go a long way, whether it's using a coach. Coaching works very well to support people to drop bad habits and create good habits. Could be an accountability partner in the office, at home. But there are many, many ways in which you can drop the time wasters. And on the back of that, like one would replace an addiction with something else. So when someone quits smoking, they want to do something else with their hands. Something like play with a stress ball or a Rubik's Cube, because we know that very often what happens when people drop smoking is they end up eating because they're doing something with their hands. So drop the time wasters and create good habits to replace that time, and just because there's so much value in creating good habits. Have agreements with yourself and with others. So very often it's going to be difficult to just make a change in your life. So create agreements with yourself, create rules for yourself, but also when you want to carve out time to do certain things, whether it's batching or blocking or whatever it is, and you've got people around you and you're in demand, you must have agreements with other people that this is when you're doing so-and-so tasks, or else you will get interrupted. And this time that you have agreements around is sacred time. Think of it as sacred time. And one of the interpersonal strategies that you can use to have agreements with other people is by offering alternatives. So imagine you're working on something and someone bothers you and they need something from you. They want to run something by you. And it's a no, which is maybe another piece of advice. Learn to say no. You got to learn to say no. But it's no with the alternative. So no, I can't do this right now. I'm working on this project. How about I come to you at 3:00? Where will I find you? So learn to say no and give alternatives so that people don't feel written off. They just feel like, in fact, it's quite professional because you're holding your time sacred and you're saying, no, not right now, but I'll come to you just now. We can have fun with this, like creating rules, like if your earphones are in, people must leave you alone. If one earphone is in, they can ask you if they can talk to you. If no earphones are in, they can come and talk to you. If you're in an office, you can put a sign on your door. There's so many ways, creative and fun ways that you can think about this. But even when you create these games around it, just get agreement with people around you. So don't just put up a sign with pictures of earphones in, out, or one out. Introduce it to people and go, this is what it means. There's also the concept of being lazy. At one time in America, it was a few years ago, probably pre-COVID, that I read this article, and there were a few of them about businesses hiring lazy people, not because they're fundamentally lazy at the core, but because they don't want to be bothered with details, unless they're engineers, again, of course. But what they do want to do is find quick, easy, effective, and efficient ways of doing things. So be lazy yourself. At least use that phrase to lead you in the direction of finding better, quicker, more effective ways of doing things. From a skill set point of view, there's a beautiful book that's called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. So it's very important to continue to develop skill sets, because you got to where you are right now because of all of the education, experience that you have. But if you want to take it to the next level, which I hope you do because humans want to evolve all the time, then you probably need to keep up skilling. Don't forget the art of deferring, delegating, and outsourcing. So think about it. We're a rugby playing country. Think about it like someone passes you a ball. You're a center and you're running down the back line. Someone passes you a ball. You catch it and you immediately throw it to your outside to the next person in the line who's going to run with it. So you get it. Someone's offering you or requesting something of you. You take it, but you pass it on. Delegate and outsource. And perhaps lastly on this is don't forget the importance of performance management. And it's not just others' performance that's important if you're a manager, a leader, whatever you may be, but it's performance of self. Manage yourself. You shouldn't have to rely on other people managing you. The business will manage you according to KPIs and scorecards and all of that. But performance manage yourself so that you can guide and nudge yourself in the direction of where you want to be. So having listened to all of this, the first insight that you may have had is that there are so many strategies to managing time, and this is the truth. The second insight that you may have had is that there are too many. And we understand this, that these in itself may be overwhelm, right? The cognitive fatigue theory. Well, like with any transformational work, you have to start somewhere, usually at the beginning with just one step. So I would suggest you pick a single time management strategy and weave it into your day. Play with it, mix it up, figure out how it can work for you, and then lock it in. Then at some stage, pick another. You could even do this in parallel, but just a heads up, don't overwhelm yourself by trying to take on too many changes at once. Baby steps, just like taking on a new hobby or committing to exercise. If you take on too much in the beginning, you won't last very long. Any of these strategies will support you to improve your relationship with time. Over time, as you select, practice, and master each one of these, or at least the ones that you choose, you will find yourself giving up the excuses that you have allowed to date to get in your way. You will find that you are dropping the negative language and slowing down, seeing time, honoring time, embracing time, creating time, taking time for yourself, and giving time to others. This is not to say that all pressure will disappear. The pressure will always be there. You will just handle and manage responsibilities and demands in a more evolved way than you used to. Mindset, mentioned earlier, is a big part of time management, starting with the acceptance that improved control and ownership of time is possible, and then step into that possibility and play with the tools that I shared with you today. That's it from me. Goodbye until next time.